For Friday, November 6th, as I discussed in class on Thursday, you're looking at the two major decisions that really shaped the power of the national government in the early 1800s: the Supremacy Clause, the Commerce Clause. The two major cases, McCulloch versus Maryland, Gibbons versus Ogden, as we were talking about the powers of Congress, both expressed and implied powers of Congress. The other That's going to be the main task. And if you hang out here for a bit, I'm going to explain some of that assignment in this particular video. But right now, I'm going to hide my big head so that I'm not in the way, and bring it back in a bit. The other thing to think about too is just the screencast notes for and GR for the House and the Senate, and making law, tentatively set to be due on Tuesday. So again, this is been posted. Again, file, make a copy, 12.4, the Senate screencast. So pay attention to the question to ensure the correct response note. Some of the questions in 12.4 have been trimmed, so pay attention to the questions when you're looking at these, especially with the Senate ones, because some of them are, I've trimmed some of them. At some point, I hope to make a screencast or have you look at this from the text, but I'm not sure which I'm going to do yet. I want that tentatively that's set to be due on Tuesday, but we'll see how far we get. So you might want to plan for that. But this is due on Monday in class, this Marshall Court exercise. So breaking it down, there are a series of questions here, and these questions refer to the descriptions of the court case having to do with the powers of the federal government that really shape the powers of the federal government. There's a brief 4 minute video that's also linked in Classroom here, as well as the transcript of this, So if you miss something in the video, you can get the answers from the transcript. The other thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to answer the questions by highlighting the correct answer. By highlighting the correct answer, you're going to need to answer the questions by highlighting the correct answer. Okay, that's another thing you're going to need to do with the multiple choice questions. The harder part of this is to interpret these clauses of the Constitution and interpret John Marshall's decision in the Supreme Court. John Marshall's decision. So again, what was the conflict between McCulloch and Maryland? Well, the United States had a lot of debt, and they were trying to, with this debt, they were trying to pay off some of this debt, and it was too cumbersome to go to these small banks. So what they did, and let me zoom this in a little bit here. So what they did, instead of going to these small banks, is they set up their own Second National Bank of the United States. But many states opposed the bank because the state banks had to compete for business. So in response, Maryland passed a law that required the National Bank to pay a heavy tax. The state of Maryland, one of the cashiers, refused to pay this tax. So he appealed the case. The Maryland Court of Appeals upheld it. And then the Supreme Court, it reached the Supreme Court. At question here is the necessary and proper clause, the so-called elastic clause that we've talked about several times over the course of this class. Congress has power to make all laws which are necessary and proper for carrying into execution of the foregoing powers. So it's also known as the elastic clause. Again, remember that Congress has the power to make money or coin money and lay taxes. So it makes sense maybe that they should have to pay taxes. It makes sense that they could tax, and it makes sense that they should have to tax because it makes some sense. So the question here is you're asking yourself is should the bank be able to be taxed by the states? So keep a couple things in mind as you're thinking about this. Keep in mind the bank is under federal jurisdiction, right? So can the states, the bank is under federal jurisdiction, states cannot tax federal agencies. Okay, keep in mind that um, the United States, keep in mind the expressed powers of money and tax and um, the ability to tax, right? And would Congress, would the national government, need a bank, for these purposes? This is not the answer per se. This is just guiding you in terms of how to go about responding to this. Okay, this should not be your answer per se. This is just the response of going about guiding for this. Okay, so as you're thinking about this, think about this. Express powers. Would the national bank need a tax for these purposes? Keep in mind that this is so. Is this probably so it seems to reason that the national government, the federal government, within its rights to set up a bank as a result of because they could coin money in tax, right? It seems to be that they could do this. The other thing to consider, even though you don't have to answer these questions, is the supremacy clause, and how you have to consider that the laws of the United States are the supreme law of the land. So consider that in your conversation as well. But then the 10th Amendment, and this is where the states argued that the powers not delegated to the United States nor prohibited are reserved to the states respectfully. So again, the conflict here is, can the bank should the bank have to pay a tax to the state of Maryland for operating in it? So the Supreme Court makes a decision on that, and the problem was the bank was quite controversial during this time period. So you have to think about the decision of Marshall here to keep in mind: should McCulloch have to pay the state tax, or should he be able to use the national bank, right, if he's not paying the state tax? Is the question. The other case that I want you to consider is there's a series of provisions here for John Marshall's decision in Gibbons v. Ogden. So the conflict of Gibbons v. Ogden is this guy wanted to make money from the ferry business and got permission from the federal government to operate a ferry between New Jersey and New York. Now realize this is interstate waters. Ogden was mad because he claimed his monopoly rights were being infringed. He got the New York State Court to forbid Gibbons' boat from landing in New York. So this is, does the New York State Legislature gives Aaron Ogden a monopoly to run a ferry service in the Hudson River, a very profitable business. But Gibbons got permission from the federal government to operate a ferry. Who has the rights here? Keep in mind, on the Hudson, this is interstate. Now nowadays there's the ferries and the bridges and the boats, the ferries, the bridges, and the tunnels that run through New York are actually ran by an interstate a joint commission, a port authority, actually nowadays, to take care of this situation. The New York, New Jersey, a port authority that runs this, an interstate compact, so to speak. But this was before that. So what does the federal government have the power to do is the question here. So think about Article 1, Section 8 of the Commerce Clause. Think about this. Under the Commerce Clause, what does the federal government have the power to do? Okay. Lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debt, and to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. So they have the right. The other thing to consider too, when you go up here, is they have, under the Commerce Clause, they have the right to pay their debts too, right? So it's within the rights, because they could coin money in tax and pay debts, right? And that certainly is a mechanism for doing that. I forgot to mention that before. What does the federal government have the power to do, right? So, and look at these things that they have the power to do. As you're looking at this, as you're interpreting this, they have the power to um, collect taxes, provide for the common defense, general welfare. So this is setting up an army. Borrow money on the credit of the United States, regulate commerce with the foreign nations. Okay, coin money. Okay, all these things that they have the power to do. So over here, just write down the layman's interpretation of what they have the power to do. Okay, what do they have the power to do? And you look over here. Okay, that's all you're going to do here. Just kind of list it out as a general means of understanding. Okay, as a general means of understanding here. What do they have the power to do? And then this is Marshall's decision, and you're going to interpret the words of Marshall's decision. And I'm going to help you through a few of these. The commerce describes the commercial intercourse between nations and parts of nations in all its branches and is regulated by the prescribing or creating of rules by carrying on the intercourse. The mind can scarcely conceive a system for regulating commerce between nations which shall exclude navigation, travel, or trade. So what he's prescribing here is the right to create rules for regulating trade among the different nations. Okay, that's what he's prescribing here. That's basically, you're going to paraphrase the meaning of each paragraph. That's what you're being instructed to do here, and that's kind of the paraphrase of the meaning of that paragraph, so to speak. Maybe what else could we talk about here? And so the right to create rules for regulating trade among the different nations is basically it, and can't and if you want to take it a bit further, cannot exclude waterways, right? And that's another thing you want to think about too. Excuse me. I apologize. So then what else does it talk about here? What would be the paraphrase here? All Americans understand. This is in the right place. I deeply apologize. So that would be like the paraphrase of this particular paragraph right here, right? That'd be the paraphrase. Let's look at this one. All Americans understand and has uniformly understood the word commerce to comprehend navigation. Thus, the court holds a power to regulate navigation is expressly granted as if that term had been added to the word commerce. So, commerce, navigating waterways is needed for commerce. And so regulating waterways is needed to regulate commerce. Which Congress has the right to do, right? So he's extending, using the necessary and proper clause here, extending the powers of the Interstate Commerce Clause. He's extending the powers of the Interstate Commerce Clause here. So I've pretty much given you two of these right now. Think about the third one. Congress has no power over commerce confined to one state alone, but retains that power as soon as the state's boundary lines has been crossed. And the power to regulate must necessarily. So you're going to respond here and here. Okay, you're going to respond here and here as you're looking along the boundaries of the regular and then so this is, think about what he's saying in this clause, a sentence about what John Marshall, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, is saying in this particular clause right here, talking about interstate commerce. The boundary lines have been crossed. When the boundary lines of the states have been crossed, that is interstate commerce. That is under the power of the states. So you need to write something to that effect here. This The acts of Congress are supreme. Again, we go back to the supremacy clause. This has a lot of influence over power of the national government, the power of the national government. Okay. So again, you need to, I'm not going to spoon feed every single thing. I've given you heavy clues here. This is talking about supremacy, and you can kind of figure that out from there. The other thing you need to do is the practice problems and highlighting those after you've read the details of the case. So you need to break these down as well. Break these down as well in terms of what does Congress have the power to do. I didn't necessarily write it all for you here. You need to write that in terms of what does Congress have the power to do. Okay, so that covers that. And then you're going to write what was the conflict between Ogden's and Gibbons according to this description here. And then and some of this I've also I've done for you. And then you're going to watch the video and also paraphrase the conflict between McCulloch and Maryland, and then answer the multiple choice questions. This is for Monday at the beginning of the hour. So you're really going to need to watch this to understand it this time. I think that will behoove you, and then you can start working in your screencast for the Senate and the House. Hope to make a screencast for the House fairly soon, or have you get it from the text that I will scan. Okay, so this is due on Monday, beginning of, let's say, beginning, not the end, not the middle, the beginning. Okay, right, I'll move this over down and over down. Sorry, my mouse just fell. I'm in my room at the thing. There we go. Okay, so this is this hopefully will provide you a little clue. If you have other questions, please feel free to reach out to me.